quem está nos ouvindo aí, mais uma live session do INCOSE Brasil. Meu nome é Raquel e hoje a gente está aqui para falar sobre certificação, o programa de certificação do INCOSE. Hoje vai ser um webinar bem especial, porque a gente tem duas convidadas, daqui a pouco eu vou apresentar elas para vocês. Então, é isso, gente, fique à vontade, vamos assistir e participar. Bom, como que vai funcionar hoje o nosso webinar? A gente vai ter, eu vou introduzir, toda vez que eu for falar vai ser em português, e toda vez que as nossas duas convidadas falarem vai ser em inglês. Então vai ser, mas o material vai estar disponível nas duas línguas, para quem perdeu alguma coisa e quiser acompanhar. Nós vamos começar falando sobre o programa de certificação em geral, dando uma ideia geral. Depois eu vou falar sobre o tutorial, né, de como conseguir, do que é preciso, quais são os passos para o ACEP, que é o primeiro nível, e também eu vou falar para o CCEP. Depois disso, a Courtney vai falar para o ICEP, que é o terceiro nível, e eu volto falando sobre o programa de equivalência acadêmica da certificação. Então, é bem interessante aí, se você estiver ouvindo a gente, foi estudante de alguma universidade ou pretende estudar, fica atento aí nessa parte. E, por último, a gente vai ter a atualização do handbook para a quinta edição, o que isso vai impactar para a certificação, como que a prova vai ser impactada, qual é o cronograma. Isso a Joshi vai falar para a gente e vai explicar direitinho. A qualquer momento, vocês podem mandar perguntas, comentários, usando o chat, se você estiver assistindo pelo YouTube, ou então usando o LinkedIn, se você estiver assistindo por lá. A gente pode mandar também em português ou em inglês, a gente vai tentar responder todas, e não importa a língua. E também, se você tiver dúvidas adicionais, a gente vai deixar no final o nosso contato. Então é isso, gente, bora participar. Bom, vou começar aqui com a nossa apresentação. Eu sou Raquel, eu sou diretora de certificação no INCOSE Brasil, e é um cargo que eles chamam de Certification Champion, né, que é um papel para divulgar, para falar sobre, para explicar, para motivar a nossa comunidade, para tentar alavancar aí a certificação no Brasil. A gente tem também a Courtney Wright, que ela é a Certification Program Manager no INCOSE, então ela é diretora-geral do programa de certificação, ela fica nos Estados Unidos e ela coordena aí esse grupo, todas as informações ficam ali focadas nela. E a gente tem a Miriumai Joshi, que ela é estagiária do INCOSE, na verdade ela acabou de me falar que o estágio dela já acabou, mas ela está aqui na maior boa vontade fazendo essa apresentação, porque nesses 2 meses que ela estagiou, ela fez bastante coisa e segue, né, tendo frutos aí desse estágio. Então, bom, vamos lá. Eu queria agradecer aí a presença delas, e é isso. Bom, a primeira coisa que a gente queria apresentar é sobre o programa em si, né? Então, o que é a certificação? É um processo formal, ele é diferente de um certificado, porque ele atesta um nível de conhecimento, experiência ou alguma habilidade específica dentro de uma organização, que nesse caso é o INCOSE, né? Então, é diferente de uma licença, porque tem uma visão mais prática, e também não tem questão regulatória. Agora, o que é a certificação CEP do INCOSE? É uma certificação em 3 níveis, começou só com o CCEP, mas hoje existem 3 níveis que reconhecem as 3 etapas, né, de um engenheiro de sistema para abranger quem está iniciando a carreira, quem já tem experiência e quem já é sênior e expert, né, no assunto. Agora, o próximo é que eu vou começar falando sobre o tutorial do ACEP, que significa Associate Systems Engineering Professional. Então, o ACEP, ele é para os indivíduos que desejam ser reconhecidos como conhecedores, mas que eles não têm ainda experiência. Pode ser desde estudante de graduação, ou até uma pessoa que começou a estudar sobre o assunto depois de ter se formado, e essa qualificação, ela serve para testar o conhecimento. Então, por conta disso, o requisito é só ter uma prova que testa aquele conhecimento, e, e aí você consegue atingir esse ACEP sendo conhecedor. Então, como que funciona? Quais são os passos? São basicamente 4 passos, e o primeiro é ser membro do INCOSE. Então, a gente tem diferentes categorias de, de membros no INCOSE. O primeiro, que é o normal, o regular, ele tem desconto de 50% pelo Brasil estar hoje classificado no PP3, que é um tipo de desconto de paridade financeira, e aí coloca o Brasil com um desconto de 50%. Tem também os membros sêniores e os estudantes. Na hora que você for se inscrever, você tem que comprovar, né, esses níveis, se você for estudante ou se você for sênior, mas, em geral, é um passo simples, né? E, assim, só lembrando que tem bastante material legal para quem está pensando em ser membro. A gente poderia falar outra apresentação sobre por que é interessante, por que vale a pena. Mas a ideia aqui é só passar esse passo. Depois de membro, você vai ter, né, o seu login, a sua senha, os seus dados pessoais, e aí você vai submeter o Form 1A, que é esse formzinho que tem uma foto dele aqui. Você consegue acessar, fazer o download desse form nessa página sobre todos os forms da certificação. Então, você faz o download, é um PDF que você preenche, e aí você salva e você submete depois que você está logado na sua conta. Então, é bem simples, é uma página só, é basicamente dados pessoais básicos, né, e-mail, nome, telefone, esse tipo de coisa, e aí você vai submeter depois que tiver logado na sua conta. Depois disso, você vai pagar a aplicação, a taxa de aplicação do ACEP, que é $180, e essa taxa também tem um desconto PP3, que é de 50% de desconto. Isso foi um desconto, se eu não me engano, é recente, esse ano, ou talvez final do ano passado, não lembro, mas está bem interessante para quem pensa em fazer isso agora, estando no Brasil, vai pagar um preço bem melhor. Então, depois que pagar essa taxa, você vai agendar o seu exame. Esse exame é feito direto com o provedor da região. Então, no Brasil, já tem provedores que estão fazendo online, então você faz a sua casa, tem alguns requisitos, né, de espaço do computador, de conexão, você tem que comprovar que você está ali fazendo a prova no ambiente adequado, e aí você faz a sua casa mesmo, paga essa taxa para o provedor, e aí você recebe o resultado na hora. Então, se você passar no exame, eles não vão te dizer, né, a nota, mas você vai saber se você passou na hora. Você pode usar esse resultado de exame até 12 meses. Se você, por exemplo, quiser pedir o ACEP ou o CICEP, no caso, depois disso você pode, e ele fica válido durante 12 meses. O que mais? Você pode fazer até 3 exames num período de 12 meses, caso você falhe, né, você não consiga a nota de corte. E você pode fazer o exame antes ou depois de completar essas etapas. Bom, agora sobre o exame, isso é uma coisa que perguntam bastante. O exame, ele tem 100 questões pontuadas, e ele é de múltipla escolha. Às vezes você precisa escolher só uma opção, às vezes várias, mas é sempre de múltipla escolha. Existem mais de 100 questões, às vezes 120, às vezes 150, porque eles usam questões extras para fazer testes, ou para coletar dados, né, para entender como que está o raciocínio, né, ou como que está sendo aceita essa questão, mas elas não valem pontos. Então, a regra são 100 questões com pontos, um ponto cada uma, o peso é igual, e a duração é 1 minuto por questão. Então, uma prova normal de 120 perguntas vai ter 120 minutos e vai valer 100 pontos, 100 questões só pontuadas. Agora, tem uma questão especial no tempo que para brasileiros e outros nativos, né, da língua, que não são nativos da língua inglesa, você pode pedir um tempo adicional e esse tempo aumenta em meia hora, para você conseguir se adaptar ali por questão da língua, né. É importante lembrar que esse tempo você tem que pedir antes de você aplicar, antes de você registrar para o exame, né. Bom, depois que você passar, você vai ficar sabendo na hora e logo em alguns dias o escritório de certificação vai te mandar um e-mail com as informações da sua certificação e o link que você pode na hora já baixar o seu certificado, e você pode escolher estar no diretório de profissionais no site do INCOSE ou não. O próximo tutorial que eu queria falar é o CICEP. Então, o CICEP é um próximo nível. Eu sou CICEP atualmente. O CICEP ele é um nível para quem quer ser reconhecido como praticante. Ou seja, você tem o conhecimento e você tem pelo menos 5 anos de experiência comprovada. Então, esse processo, ele, além da prova, que é idêntica para o ICEP, ele tem um passo a mais, que é você verificar se aquela tua experiência profissional comprova a tua prática, né, na engenharia de sistemas. Então, os passos são, eu só esqueci aqui, agora que eu vi, gente, eu esqueci de corrigir o título. Mas os passos são: primeiro, você é o membro individual, da mesma forma, é igualzinho o ACEP. O segundo passo, você tem esse Form 1, que é para o CICEP, da mesma forma que você baixa o outro, aqui você é a mesma coisa, tem esse link com todos os forms, você faz o download no PDF, você preenche com seus dados, só que esse é um formulário mais extenso, né? Não são só dados pessoais. Se eu não me engano, tem umas 11 páginas, ou 10, e é lá que você vai escrever toda a sua experiência profissional, e existe uma organização relacionada aos conhecimentos de engenharia de sistemas. Então, às vezes, você pode ter experiências durante um ano em um ciclo em algum processo específico a algum ciclo de vida, ou você pode ter tido outros tipos de experiências. Então, esse informe, ele abrange as diferentes experiências que um profissional pode ter, um praticante, e você vai detalhar. Existem alguns requisitos, né, que você tem que cumprir com algumas. Você não pode ter ficado só 5 anos fazendo a mesma coisa, o que é bem difícil na engenharia de sistemas, mas existem alguns requisitos e guias para você preencher esse formulário, que estão no nosso site também, no mesmo lugar que você acessa ao tutorial, você consegue ver esses guias. O próximo aqui além desse Form 1, você precisa entregar as Reference Forms 4B. Essa parte é quando você nomeia referências profissionais da tua jornada, né, que elas vão confirmar, né, e vão dizer como foi a sua atuação nesses anos de praticante de engenharia de sistemas. Essas referências, você pode escolher, né, o mínimo são 3 que precisam mandar esse form, mas você pode nomear mais, se de repente você tiver tido experiências mais fragmentadas, né, naquele período teu de 5 anos. Então, o ideal é que seja alguém superior, né, na questão de liderança, que tenha sido seu líder, ou com mais experiência, e se for alguém já certificado, é melhor ainda. Então, essas informações são levadas em conta quando o escritório de certificação faz essa avaliação para avaliar a tua experiência, né, para fazer essa comprovação. Não é algo muito linear e simples, porque depende muito, né, de pessoa para pessoa. Então, uma última coisa sobre isso é que a referência que vai mandar esse form, ela tem que mandar direto para o e-mail do INCOSE, que está aqui, né, que é o CEP Reference. Não, o aplicante, né, o candidato, não pode mandar direto, tem que ser recebido pela referência. Quando eu fiz o meu processo, eu acho que eu dei uns 6 nomes de referência, e aí os 3 primeiros que responderam, eu pedi para seguirem com o processo, porque no meu caso não era algo tão fragmentado. Então, se você tiver, por exemplo, poucas pessoas que conviveram com você esses 5 dias de experiência e elas forem capazes de cobrir, não precisa ter vários nomes, é mais uma possibilidade. Os últimos 2 passos aí é pagar a taxa. Então, como o CICEP é um processo mais extenso, né, ele requer mais uma avaliação, um grupo de pessoas maiores envolvidos, ele tem um custo mais alto, ele hoje custa $350, e no momento não tem desconto PP3, mas era algo que eu acho que o escritório de certificação ia dar uma olhada para ver se seria possível. Bom, de qualquer forma, vale a mesma coisa para o ICEP, o pagamento é válido até 12 meses, se caso você quiser fazer a prova depois, né, ou mandar o material depois. E aí, quando você agendar e fizer o exame, né, é exatamente o mesmo exame do nível anterior. Então, você vai fazer registrar com o mesmo provedor, pagar a taxa para o provedor, fazer a prova, você pode fazer da sua casa. Isso aí é idêntico com o ACEP. Bom, agora o ACEP, I think it's with you, Courtney. Thank you.
Yes, the ESEP certification, sometimes people confuse this to think that it is for someone who is very experienced, but the first E stands for expert. This is for someone who is very influential in systems engineering. This person does have to have a significant amount of experience, but what we're looking for is someone who has, as we say, moved the needle. They've made a difference in systems engineering within their community. We're also looking for them having the ability to switch into working on a different type of program and apply the same type of systems engineering capabilities as a chief engineer kind of position, even if they haven't had that chief engineer job title. If you would go to the next slide, please. The requirements, the steps in the process for applying for ESEP start off pretty similar. We are requiring that the person be an individual INCOSE member, and they will have to submit application materials through their INCOSE profile. The ESEP is not going to be taking an exam. So that's one of the things that was going to come up soon. But what they may have that's different from a CSEP is they may have an interview, and their references may have an interview. So here in step 2, where we say to submit application materials, we have an individual application form, Form 41, but we also have the reference forms similar to for the CSEP. These references, though, may be called upon to participate in a phone interview. So you'll want to choose your references carefully. You want at least 2 of your references to be comfortable and capable of participating in a phone interview that is for the purpose of checking your ESEP qualifications, your technical leadership that you've claimed in your application. Paying the application fee, all right, this is separate from the individual membership fee. This fee is going to be not a guarantee that you're going to be certified, but paying for the expenses of processing and considering your certification. Once you're an INCOSE member, you've submitted your application form, all your materials, you paid your application fee, then INCOSE will assign your application package to a set of reviewers. They will look over the materials you've submitted, and if they believe that you are potentially qualified, you'll be contacted to schedule a 1-hour Zoom interview. And during that interview, you'll be asked to discuss some of your professional leadership experience. This will be just you and some of our ESEP reviewers on the phone call. And then after that, they may choose to interview some of your references. You would get to choose which of your references you wanted to be interviewed as part of their consideration of whether you were qualified. That interview scares people. And so I want to reassure you a little bit that this is not a knowledge exam over the phone. This is not going to be asking you multiple choice questions and quizzing you on the INCOSE handbook. One of the characteristics of individuals applying for ESEP is that they have extensive experience, and they're going to be someone who could probably think of all different kinds of exceptions to the rules of the Systems Engineering Handbook. We are looking for them to understand that nuance. We are not looking to quiz them. But what we do want to know is, tell us a little bit more about some of what you have put in your application form for your work experience. We're going to want to know some examples of situations that you've been in through your work experience. This interview is performed in English only. If English is not your first language, we'd like you to let us know up front. If we need to come up with some special accommodations for you, that could be something like putting the interview questions on the screen in writing during the conversation. Whatever kind of accommodations you think would be helpful, please let us know about that. We'll do our best to help with that. The more time you give us, the better we can plan for that in advance. We will do our very best to ensure that if English is not your first language, one of your interviewers will also be someone who speaks other languages in addition to English, so that they can be more understanding of how that might affect your communications. The interviews are performed through Zoom, and it's at a time that considers your time zones and those of the interviewers. You all will work together to choose a time that is good for the interview. After the interview, you'll be contacted to let you know the outcome of your certification application.
Just one question, Courtney, about the ESEP interview. So is that a group of people interviewing, or is just one-on-one?
It'll be one candidate and 2 or 3 reviewers. One reviewer will be asking them questions, and the others are just going to be listening in and assessing the answers.
Ok. Thank you. Just curiosity.
Yeah.
Ok. Então, aqui é só uma imagem para a gente entender, né, o processo. A gente tem aqui na linha azul o caminho que seria inicial, né? Então, primeiro você é membro do INCOSE, depois você escolhe o seu nível, você completa a documentação, os forms, o que precisar fazer, paga a sua taxa, dependendo do nível, faz o exame, caso seja o ACEP ou o CICEP, e se for o ICEP, vai direto sem fazer o exame. E depois que você atingiu os 2 primeiros níveis, você tem a opção de fazer o upgrade, né, subir o nível. Então, vamos supor que você seja estudante ou começando a carreira, você fez o ACEP, e aí você ficou 5 anos com aquele ACEP, e aí praticando engenharia de sistemas. Então, você quer fazer essa renovação e subir para o CICEP. E você, então, vai entregar, você vai manter você sendo membro, né, a sua filiação ao INCOSE, e aí você vai entregar a documentação necessária para o CICEP, e isso acontece também do CICEP para o ICEP. Você pode transicionar, né, entre esses níveis. E para manter a certificação, você tem o ACEP é 5 anos, né, de validade, o CICEP você tem que renovar a cada 3 anos. A renovação não é necessária para o ACEP, né, que é o último nível. Tá, a próxima aqui. Então, é um quadro geral de requisitos dos 3 níveis, só para sumarizar aqui o que a gente falou. Baseado também, né, nos pilares aí, né? A primeira questão, começar aqui pela direita, é o conhecimento. Então, o ACEP é exigido só o conhecimento. Você não precisa ter experiência, referência, nem experiência com liderança. O CICEP, além do conhecimento, você tem que ter experiência e prover as referências. E o ACEP já é bastante focado na liderança. Bom, agora eu vou falar sobre o programa de equivalência acadêmica. Para quem não sabe, é possível conseguir fazer adquirir esse conhecimento aí pela prova através de uma equivalência acadêmica. Então, muitas universidades, seja de graduação ou pós-graduação, conseguem fazer esse acordo com o INCOSE e no curso que ele apresenta, ele já ensinar o conteúdo do handbook e o aluno que passa, né, nas provas e tem uma nota satisfatória, ele consegue já sair com esse nível ACEP certificado. Então, é um acordo bem legal. A Courtney estava me falando que foi uma iniciativa para aumentar o número de certificados em países que não falam a língua inglesa, porque parecia com frequência que era exigido, que era pedido, né, que fosse feitas as provas do certificação em outras línguas. Mas pela dificuldade de viabilizar isso, eles pensaram em outra forma, e aí esse programa de equivalência acadêmica supriria isso. Então, no Brasil, as universidades podem ensinar engenharia de sistemas em português normalmente, o aluno pode fazer a prova em português, ou a forma como a universidade quiser avaliar, e aí no final ele consegue ser o ACEP, ou se ele já tiver experiência, ele pode até já pular para o CCEP, pelo fato de ter participado desse curso. Então é uma possibilidade interessante que a gente está tentando implementar no Brasil. A gente já conversou com 3 universidades, né, cursos, para ver se a gente consegue viabilizar isso. E para isso, só dando uma ideia geral, existem os requisitos administrativos e os requisitos técnicos. Então, administrativo, a organização ela tem que ser um membro, um CAB member, né, do Academic Council, e essa é uma afiliação ao INCOSE a nível entidade, então existem um outro pacote de benefícios, né, de relacionamento. O handbook do INCOSE tem que ser parte da referência, e o programa tem que ter algum profissional certificado, ou CICEP ou ACEP. A nota de corte ela é alta, né, 85%, mas podem ser feitas diferentes provas, pode ser quiz, redação, trabalho, isso aí é bastante livre, é bem acessível a forma como a universidade vai atestar, né, vai verificar o conhecimento do aluno. E esses requisitos técnicos, então, é um acordo que a universidade faz com o INCOSE para dizer como que ele vai checar aqueles objective learnings, que são todos os pontos que o INCOSE coloca para ver se o aluno está, se ele tem aquele conhecimento chave para poder passar, para poder ter esse ACEP, né? Tem uma vantagem aqui, que para todos os alunos do programa de equivalência acadêmica, a taxa para o ACEP está com um desconto, na verdade, um waiver, né? Não precisa pagar, então está saindo grátis para o aluno até final do ano que vem. Quem é aluno de algum programa de equivalência, consegue ter esse nível de certificação sem pagar aquela taxa de inscrição que a gente comentou no começo. Bom, agora eu vou falar do handbook update. Joshi, please, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. Hello. So now I'll be talking a little bit about the handbook update. So this INCOSE Systems Engineering Handbook reflects the state of good practice of for any systems engineer. So the update of handbook is very important because it will eventually include the process, method, and concept changes that happen over time. It also captures the changes that happen in the standards that a system engineer should follow, and it also captures the additional information that comes over here. So the handbook generally is updated every 5 to 8 years. So the current handbook edition in use is fourth edition, and we'll have fifth edition of handbook. So here's a brief schedule of how the handbook has been developed. So the development of the new handbook has started in 2019, and now currently it's in last stages. So it was scheduled that the final draft of the handbook be given to the publisher, that is Wiley, and the handbook of release is scheduled to be in the third quarter of next year. So that's the brief. This is the brief schedule. Next slide, please. So I'll just talk about what was the structure of the fourth edition, and then the structure of fifth edition with its content, so that you get to know the differences between the handbook and decide which one you would want to study. So here is the structure of fourth edition. So the fourth edition of handbook was mostly it concentrated more on processes. So as you can see, I think four chapters focus a lot on the processes, systems engineering processes, and the other chapters focus on the systems engineering concepts. So the structure has been modified for the next edition. Next slide, please. Yeah, so here's the structure of fifth edition. So we have a lesser number of parts, and the content here is balanced. So there is equal focus given to the systems engineering concepts and the processes. So this handbook can be considered to be a core handbook rather than a process centric handbook, which was the fourth edition. Next slide, please. Can you go back? Sorry. Yeah. So I hope this is visible. So here I have little bit details on the content of the new handbook, and I've highlighted the new topics that have been added. So as you can see, there are substantial amount of new topics added. So a few that I would like to focus on are that there are a lot of new concepts added. There are a lot of new case studies added, and different domains have been covered. And one the part 5, which focuses on systems engineering competencies, or the skills that a system engineer should have in their professional career, has been added. So yeah, here are the new topics. So it would really be exciting to learn from the new handbook. Could you go to the next slide? Yeah. So as you can see, the differences between fourth and fifth edition have been that the way we look at the handbook to be like process centric book has been changed, and it will be a more core handbook. It will cover processes and concepts that are required in equal with equal importance. The structure has been changed, and a lot of additional information has been added. So what the advantages of studying new handbook is that it has a refreshed content. It reflects the state of good practice of systems engineering right now at this point of time. And it also includes references to many new products which focus on various domain specific applications, which was not there in the previous handbook. So yeah, next slide, please. So here I'll just give you a brief timeline of how this systems engineering handbook update would affect the exams. So there will surely be a huge impact because the knowledge exam is based on the handbook. So as of current schedule, the handbook is scheduled to be released in the third quarter of the next year. So, right after the release of new handbook, there'll be a new type of exam that will be introduced. So, it will be called a hybrid exam, which will have content based on both the fourth edition of handbook and the fifth edition. So, it will have the exam will be based on the common content of the fourth edition and the fifth edition. So, an applicant who is preparing to write the exam can either study the fourth edition of handbook or the fifth edition of handbook. And after post 6 months of release of the new handbook, this hybrid exam will completely be replaced by a new type of exam, which will be solely dependent on the fifth edition. But there is an exception here. So any regions which would require translation of handbook into their regional languages, the hybrid exam would go for a longer time and not just 6 months. Next slide, please. Yeah, so here I'll just cover a few of the questions that you would have as a certification applicant. So first of all, who would be impacted? So any ASAP and CSAP applicant who has to take the knowledge exam would be impacted, because the knowledge exam will be based on first the hybrid content of the handbooks, and then later just on the fifth edition. The applicants who are pursuing ESEP certification will nowhere be impacted, because the telephonic interviews are not based on the content of the handbook. So, when can a applicant start taking exam on the fifth edition? So, as I mentioned earlier, when the new handbook is published, which would be the third quarter of next year, a hybrid exam will be given, which will be based on content common to the fourth and the fifth edition. So, as soon as the new handbook is released, an applicant can start studying from the fifth edition and write an exam, which would be based on fifth edition. The next question that would come to your mind is that when will the testing based on fourth edition stop? So the answer to that is mostly after 6 months of the handbook release. So until then, the hybrid exam will take place, which will be based on, again, on both fourth and fifth edition. So until 6 months later, the hybrid exam would still be there, and an applicant can study from the fourth edition and take an exam based on that. Again, the exception being the regions where the handbook translation is required. So in such regions, the hybrid exam would continue to stay. So after that, you might have a question on academic equivalency. So if you are a student of academic equivalency, it would not have a direct impact on you if you in when compared to if you are trying to study for the knowledge exam. So for students from academic equivalency, they will just be tested based on different learning objectives. So, yeah, will there be any change in the question paper pattern? So the answer to that is no. So the questions, there will still be 100 scored questions, and the time given to each of them would still be same, which is 1 minute per question. So again, I would just like to emphasize on hybrid exam. So the meaning of hybrid exam is that this exam would be based on content which is common to both the fourth edition and the fifth edition. So any candidate studying can take this exam by studying either the fourth edition handbook or the fifth edition handbook, and this exam would take place right after the release of new handbook, and it would continue to be provided at least after 6 months of the handbook release. Thank you. Next slide, please. Um, so I would just like to touch upon what would be the pros and cons of taking exam at different intervals of time with respect to the release of handbook. So if you take an exam from right now to the release of new handbook, the advantages would be that you will have to study fourth edition handbook, and there will be a lot of training materials to support your preparation. And if you are really motivated to give the exam right away, I would advise that you do not wait for the fifth edition of handbook to be released, and take the exam as soon as possible. So disadvantages of taking exam right away before the release of new handbook is that you would need to prepare for longer time than what you would need for the hybrid exam, and you will lose on reading the fifth edition. So you some topics are new in the fifth edition, so that would be a lag, and some companies would prefer candidates who have the knowledge of fifth edition, so that would be a con. So if you decide to take an exam right after the release of handbook and until the 6 months after that, so the hybrid exam would be in place. So the content covered in this exam would be smaller, because it would be common content between the fourth edition and the fifth edition. So you would most likely take lesser time when compared to taking an exam right now, which will be based on the fourth edition, and afterwards, which would be solely based on the fifth edition. So yeah, you would need lesser preparation time. The cons would be that if you decide to study from fifth edition, since the handbook would be newly released, you might not find a lot of training materials, so that would be a difficulty. And if you decide to study from the fourth edition, then you would have the same cons as taking the exam right away. Next slide, please. So yeah, the last part would be if you decide to take an exam after 6 months of release of the fifth edition. So we expect that during this time period, the exams would be solely based on the fifth edition and not on the common content between the fourth and the fifth edition. So during this time, you will be the pros of taking the exam then would be that you would study fifth edition, which would have very new content, refresh content, and you would probably learn more than just studying the fourth edition. And the SEPs who would get certified by studying the fifth edition would probably be preferred by employers and companies because they would have an up to date knowledge. The cons to this, when compared to the hybrid exam, is that you would have to study for a longer time or study more when compared to studying for the hybrid exam. So that is the con. So based on the information that I've presented right now, you can decide to take exam at any point of time. So that is totally up to you. So yeah, that's what I wanted to convey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh. I just want to ask a question about the hybrid exam.
Yeah.
So the applicant, they can choose to study by one or another. It means that the content, it's just like an overlapping content from
Yes.
both, right? They don't need to
Yes.
study both books.
Yes, exactly. So they can choose to study from either fourth edition or the fifth edition. So the content will be overlapping, and it would be lesser than studying just the fourth edition or just the fifth edition individually. So yeah.
That's good to know. Yeah, so just we have some questions here, but I will start for one. I think one of the last we received because it's related to that. I think you
Okay.
mentioned. I will put on the screen.
Yeah.
So the new topics, are the new topics a reorganization or they're really new contents? It's like a
Um,
mix, right?
yeah, it's mixed. So some of the content that was already there in the previous handbook has been reorganized, and there have been additional topics as well. So it's both.
Okay, thank you. So we will, I think we end our presentation. I will start checking the questions and so we can answer. So let me see here. Let's start with this one. I think this is an easy one, right, Courtney? Who reviews the application and who evaluates reference and materials? So they are all from their certification office, are volunteers. How is that? How do you organize it?
Yeah, that's right. We have sometimes throughout the year, we will look for additional volunteers to join the certification program office as certification application reviewers. Just the acronym is CARS. So our CARS are volunteers who are already CSEPs or ESEPs, and we train them and tell them what to look for in our application packages, and they work together to review the CSEP and ESEP applications that are submitted.
Okay, thank you. There's another one. I think it's kind of related. Let me see. It's about reference. Just a moment. I just here. So for who it was asked to be a reference applicant, is there any guide or material to help fill in the form? I think in the website there is a guide, right? I've
I
seen
think
that.
there is too. I'll try to look it up if the other question, if the next question is not related to me, I'll see if I can look it up while we're on
Yeah,
here. Um,
yeah, I
but
think I saw some link saying like a guidance or some reference.
There is
yeah,
a sample form, I think, on the
well,
website.
yes, and there's a sample that's along with the other forms on the website. You'll see the sample in there. One thing that I'll note for the references is that we are going to be putting up a new reference form soon that will tell you what I'm about to say, but it's true already. There's a section of the reference form 4B where the reference has to say what they have observed the applicant doing. You may copy that from the application form, and you can just copy word for word what's in the application form, and then the reference can just say, I saw them do these things. They have to have known the person during that time. They don't have to have seen it with their eyes, but they have to have experienced the applicant doing that work. But we used to say the reference had to use their own words to describe it. We now say you may use the applicant's words and just confirm it. We actually prefer when it is done this way, because for our reviewers, they can just look at the text and see that it matches, and they don't have to do as much interpreting of the two different statements in there. So pretty soon our reference form will give that advice, but even for now, it's allowed.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we have a lot of questions about CSAP and ASAP, mostly, I think. I think this is, I will show here. So this is something that people keep asking. Is there any expectation for have like discount on CSAP fees
Yeah.
or ASAP?
Yeah, great question. So the context for this is that INCOSE has adopted as its discount structure PPP. And I'm going to come back to that. And so far, it has applied that discount to membership, and the certification program got approval a few months ago to apply that discount to the ASAP application fee. We are not yet approved to give that discount to the CSEP and ESEP, because one of the conditions of that PPP discount structure within INCOSE is that the operating costs of processing the of whatever the work is that we're giving a discount on, the incremental cost we can't be losing money on that. And so our CSEP and our ESEP processing with the volunteers and the sending the materials around and all of that costs too much right now for us to give that full PPP discount. So this is something I'm working on very actively, is trying to figure out how can we be more efficient with our processing of CSEP and ESEP applications so that we can qualify for offering that same discount structure. And if not that discount, some partial discount. In parallel with that, INCOSE is looking at whether PPP is the right discount structure, which means a whole variety of things. Could it be a greater discount? Could it be a lesser discount? Could it be different types of differentiation? And so both of those things are very much in work. I do expect a positive change for CSEP and ESEP application fees. I expect we will offer some kind of discount for those next year in 2023. I don't have any idea right now whether it's going to be PPP3 or some other discount.
Yeah, because this is something that's always concerned Brazilians. It's about the exchange rate for a dollar. It can be pretty expensive.
Yeah, we're fortunate that INCOSE has leadership right now that is really paying attention to that. Is paying attention to exchange rates and is paying attention to income levels worldwide, and is trying to do better. So I think that we're looking and moving in the right direction, and I just regret that we can't get there as fast as we'd like to.
Yeah, it's good to hear that. So the next one, it's also related to fees. There's an application fee and an exam fee.
Yeah.
Could you please explain the difference?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so INCOSE manages the processing of the application. And so I'll take the ESEP as the example of that we receive all the materials, when we create the forms, we create the instructions, we communicate about it, we receive the materials, we look them over. If we identify any problems initially, we send them back or tell the person, like, hey, fix this before we send it to a review team, assign it to a review team, all that kind of stuff. That's what the application fee is paying for ESEP and for CSEP. For a candidate who's taking the knowledge exam, the certification program covers all of the expense of creating the knowledge exam, but the expense of delivering it, which is pretty much proctoring and showing you the questions and scoring the questions, that's the delivery of the exam. And it costs just as much if you take the exam one time well, it costs the same amount each time you take the exam. We have to have a proctor in place. We have to have the scoring materials, if it's printed, if it's renting space, all that kind of stuff. So the exam fee is covering the expenses that we have for presenting you with and scoring the exam that you take. If you pass the exam the first time, you're going to pay one application fee and one exam fee. If you fail the exam and then fail the exam and then pass the exam, it was 3 exam attempts, you will have paid the exam fee 3 times and the application fee just 1 time. There are some programs that combine those both and have a higher application fee. We've chosen not to do that, which sets us up so that we can do academic equivalency and other things where you are only paying for what you're using.
Okay, yeah. Another one, after ASAP or CSAP, if I don't keep my INCOSE membership active, do I need, do I need to do the knowledge exam again?
Okay, so when you get certified, you are an INCOSE individual member and you have passed certification. And as long as, and at that point, you're certified. But if you allow your membership to lapse, you're no longer certified. If you still had some time left on that membership, let's say, excuse me, on the certification. So let's say Raquel applied for her CSEP. She was an individual member. She got her CSEP. And then 2 years into having her CSEP, she lets her membership lapse. If she comes back 6 months later and her CSEP hasn't reached its expiration date, she would be allowed to renew her membership and then her CSEP kind of reactivates. If she waits until after her CSEP has expired, so that's going to be 3 years after she got certified as a CSEP, and then she says, oh, I want to be a CSEP again, she's going to have to reactivate her membership. And then we're going to see, well, okay, you're a member now, but it's been more than 3 years. You haven't renewed your CSEP certification yet. And so she's going to have to renew her certification either through PDUs, with the professional development units, continuing education activities, or if the CSEP has already expired by, I think if it's at least 6 months expired, she may take the exam to refresh her certification, to renew it as a late renewal. But she's never going to have to retake the exam again if she has the continuing education units to allow her to do the late renewal.
Yeah, so I think this is, there is another question related to that. It's in Portuguese, but it's saying that after I got my CSEP, if I work outside the scope of the systems engineering, am I still eligible to renew my CSEP after 3 years? So I do need to keep like the practicing the whole time, right?
Okay, 2 different possibilities. One is kind of a weird thing, and I'll explain it first. Let's say you didn't just switch into a different industry. Let's say you stopped working altogether. This sometimes happens with a medical situation, could be maternity leave, could be just taking some time out of the workforce, could be military deployment, something just totally different. You actually can put your certification on hold and then reactivate it later, and you get the time that was remaining on your certification. That's not the it's not that common, but it does exist. So you would search on the INCOSE website for reactivation and putting on hold rather than renewal. But toward the other thing, the more standard thing that's done here, I'll make the distinction that the work experience that gets you certified is different from the continuing education that keeps you certified. So probably, even if you're doing a different type of work that's not systems engineering, you're probably doing some kind of learning in that career, some kind of ongoing professional development, maybe not directly related to systems engineering, but probably somewhat professionally related. is probably going to count toward your continuing education renewal. We accept things pretty broadly, like project management or security refresher training. That kind of stuff can qualify, as well as volunteer activities, things you're doing with nonprofits, STEM things. I would recommend look into qualifying renewal activities. And if you want to, you can send a certification at INCOSE.net and say, question for Courtney about renewal, something like that. And I'll help talk you through it, because most people are already doing things that will qualify them to renew their certification just as part of your daily living.
Yeah, it's hard to put systems engineering in a box. So, I mean, there is so many ways of practicing it. Yeah, there is one here question about the exam. Is it something like
Yeah, I can
new?
speak to this.
Yeah.
So the question was, what's the minimum score for approving the exam? And I'm going to tell you, there are lots of questions like this, and the answer to all of them is, I'm not going to tell you the answer to that question. So we work with specialists in designing exams. They're psychometricians, and they've advised us not to share what the passing score is, not to share what your score is after you take the exam, and not to share what the passing rate is. What I can tell you is that it's not 100%, it's not 0%. It's something that is hard to achieve, but for those of us who've taken engineering classes, we realize that sometimes the passing score is surprisingly low. So it's challenging. What we have done is we've calibrated every version of the exam. So they may have different passing scores, but they have the equal difficulty of how hard it is to pass a different version of the exam, because we do so much beta testing of our exam questions that we know which of them are which difficulty level. So you're never going to take a harder or easier version of the exam, because we have it level set.
Yeah.
Well, I should say, if you take a harder or easier version, we have the passing score adjusted for that.
Yeah, when I did the exam, it was just a screen saying you pass. I was expecting to see the score, but nope.
Yeah,
Nope.
I know that's disappointing, but it's the advice that we've gotten is to not let people get hung up on the details of that.
Yeah. I think we have the last one, maybe the last. Yeah. So I think it's more related to the value I was saying that the Brazilians wanted to understand from the certification. So the companies that recognize and look for certified professionals, do they interact with INCOSE for feedback on those hired professionals or make suggestions to the certification process?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have some organizations that have agreements with INCOSE that they're going to help their candidates prepare for certification, and we in turn will give them a bit of a streamlined process when going through the review process for those applications. Similarly, the INCOSE Corporate Advisory Board was the body that requested INCOSE create a certification program. And so both of those channels are full of organizations that are looking for and hiring certified individuals, and they give us lots of feedback. Mostly it's not feedback on how those individuals have performed. Mostly it's they don't tell us much about that, except they want more of those people. They want to get their folks certified. They want to know how to find more certified people. So I think that we can imply from that they are finding those people to work well. In addition to that, feedback that I've gotten from some organizations that hire certified individuals, that get their individuals certified, they talk about how useful it is when you have people coming from different environments or different cultures, or even different parts within a company, that when you have those folks come together to work, kind of to shuffle within teams, and people are meeting their coworkers for the first time, one of the first things they do is they figure out which of them have INCOSE certification. And those people then take over the meeting and they say, okay, we can all communicate with each other. The rest of you catch up. This is the way we're going to do things. Not necessarily that they're going to do things the way INCOSE does, but that they're able to talk about, here's how INCOSE does it. What ways are we going to change from that baseline? And it's just a much more efficient conversation than starting from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's in Brazil, I've heard that it's starting to get some search for certified professionals now. I mean, I'm not there, but I've heard that sometimes in LinkedIn there are some specific calls for certified. So I think this is just the beginning for the Brazil market. But I've seen that in Europe and especially in the United States, it is much more stronger how companies look for this kind of professional. Yeah, so I think we answer all the main questions if I'm not missing anything. Yeah, we have a great engagement. Thank you everyone who listen us, and special thank you to Joshi and Courtney for being here, for being available, explaining. And it's very important, all the support that we receive from the certification program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Raquel.
Thank you. So I just will end and remind some information here. Obrigado, pessoal, quem participou aí. Se tiverem mais dúvidas, podem entrar em contato. Nossos e-mails estão aqui. Tem também bastante informação no site do INCOSE sobre certificação. E lembrando que estão abertas as chamadas para artigos para o Simpósio Internacional do INCOSE, que vai acontecer o ano que vem, no Havaí, em junho. Então, as inscrições vão até 15 de dezembro. Se alguém tiver aí algum artigo, alguma apresentação, alguma ideia de painel e quiser participar, aproveita aí a oportunidade que vai ser bem legal. Tá joia? Obrigado, todo mundo. Até a próxima. Thank you, girls. Bye, bye.